Yep, I'm still letting people in, but go ahead. You can go ahead and get us started.
So, welcome everybody. We are talking about part four of the Smart Dating 101 series, and the general theme is true love versus sociopaths. If you haven't seen the first three parts, don't worry about it. This will still be quite helpful to you. And just to remind everyone, the presentation part is recorded and put on YouTube. So we're going to be putting the links in the chat. The links are also in the Patreon if you're on our free Patreon, and they're also in the Meetup group. So you can go back, go on YouTube, and watch the previous parts and kind of get the holistic sense of what we've been talking about for the last few months. With that being said, Terrance, since you have yet to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, man.
Hello, I'm a criminologist and former criminal investigator from the Detroit metro area. I've worked a lot of crimes against children cases and a lot of gang cases as well. So we're just using that background into relationship dynamics. Because a lot of times these problematic people, these predators out there, they give off certain warning signs. But if we're not aware of those warning signs, we can bring that person into our life. And so we're here to make sure that people see those warning signs way, way in advance and hopefully never bring those people into our lives and around our families. Next, you,
Absolutely.
Ryan.
Hi, my name's Ryan, and I'm an engineer by trade. I focus on how systems are built, how they're destroyed, and how they're maintained. So I do a lot of research and understanding kind of the mechanisms of how we can spot problems and how we can mitigate them. And so I love partnering with Terrance because he studies human behavior and I study a lot of the process. And so together we can understand very quickly how to change not only our view on things, but what we can do on a daily basis that has such a rebound and resounding effect very quickly to change our situation.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and get started. So the theme that we're going for with this one is anyone is capable of anything at any time if given the right opportunity. And this is why a lot of people fall for predators, is they think they have an idea of what a problematic person looks like. They think they have an idea of what a criminal looks like. But far too often in the real world, they come in all different shapes and sizes. A quick little experience point, back when I was doing certain crimes and trying to solve certain crimes in Detroit, one of the things that would happen is there would be a gang fight and they would assume that the children and women that are off to the side were not part of the gang, but they were. And what would happen is the people would get stabbed, people would get shot because individuals weren't paying attention to their full surroundings. So that's why it's so important to realize you have to have discernment all over the place. Now, it's not that you look at everyone as a threat, but you have to be aware that there are potential problematic people peppered all throughout society and not just in one place. Next slide.
What we can understand first off is what shapes our attention, because what we draw our attention to, what we focus on, is what we tend to think about. And what we're focusing on and thinking about is going to drive how much time we spend making our decisions and what we're going to make decisions about. If I'm not looking for a new car, I don't need to make a decision on a new car. And we can understand this a little bit more by diving in to our biology. So the reticular activating system filters out information and passes along what matches our current priorities or interests. So if lately your friend got a new red Mazda Miata or a new Porsche or something, and your attention is drawn to it, you might notice that for the next few days, you seem to notice a whole lot more of that one thing than you did before. It's not necessarily that it's popped out of nowhere and now you're noticing it. It's the fact that you've drawn your attention to it. So if we notice that we tend to be drawn or be attracted to problematic people or problematic situations, not only are we going to see it everywhere, but we're going to pay more attention to it than the good things and the good opportunities and the good people in front of us. And that's sometimes why we ask ourselves, well, why can't I find a good man? Why can't I find a good woman? Why is it so hard to find somebody? It's because of the reticular activating system, and it's only showing us what we've been looking for or paying attention to. Another thing is to understand how the amygdala plays a role. So it quickly detects emotional significance and threats, alerting you rapidly to possible danger. Think of your fight or flight response. If we understand when we're feeling uneasy about something and to take it seriously rather than kind of throw it off or push it aside, this can also help us in problematic situations where we might not know exactly how to pinpoint what's off, but we know to be more alert about it. And the last part is how the hippocampus helps us focus, especially when it comes to our prefrontal cortex. So it enables you to focus. The frontal cortex is where our personality lies. It determines our personality. So that whatever we tend to focus on, whatever drives us, whatever inspires us, whatever we're attracted to, and how we have a control over our emotions. The prefrontal cortex plays a huge role, but the hippocampus really regulates those emotions. So when we develop new experiences and we develop a steady pattern of those experiences, for instance, if we are hanging around people who bring us down all the time, they're depressing, they have a bad outlook on life, simply by changing the number of people around us who are forward thinking, opportunistic, uh, positive, and we do that consistently for a long period of time, it can actually change our emotional outlook and it can help change our personality. So, one of the first steps that we can take when thinking about, I feel like things aren't working out for me, and everywhere I go, I see problems or negativity, or I don't even know why they're popping up, is to think about what are we focusing on first?
Absolutely. And because of these beliefs, they shape our attention. And because our attention is shaped, that means that if we come from certain backgrounds and we don't have certain information,
Mhm.
red flags in people just go unnoticed, just like green flags in people go unnoticed. And when somebody, especially if they have trauma in their life, if they've come from broken households, if they come from divorce or all these other things, it shapes our perception by giving us heightened vigilance and danger. So where we start feeling unsafe, the brain becomes highly alert. It starts scanning the environment for all these potential threats, amplifying danger cues, and then we end up misreading situations as threatening. But then on the other end, it makes us very susceptible to problematic people because somebody that comes in our life bringing warmth, bringing what looks like genuine care, we over commit to that person too quickly because they're giving our systems, our neurological systems, a break. And that's why so many individuals that come from trauma and horror and bad backgrounds end up into the clutches of problematic people. And then it creates the wider attention with safety. And this is on the flip side. So what in criminology, this is called criminal innocence. So if somebody comes from a background that they haven't had to learn how to look behind their back, they haven't come from a background where problematic and dangerous people are around, it makes it so you don't notice those individuals. So we believe you are safe, allows for the broader attention to positive and neutral signals. But on one end, they might support better decision making and connections because we can see, nice and healthy people. On the other end, we don't see dangerous people when they're in front of us. So there has to be some type of middle ground between noticing problematic people and also noticing those good, genuine people that want connections. And that's what we're going to go deeper into, and our workshop is about. Go ahead, Ryan.
So if we are approaching a stranger or we're trying to develop new relationships with somebody, whether it's a friend, whether it's a romantic partner, whatever the situation is, by taking ourselves through a simple four-stage process, we can start evaluating somebody and deciding how much to open up to them and how much damage they might cause to us. So the first one is awareness and self-profiling. And the idea is before we start thinking that we're good enough to evaluate other people, or if we can evaluate other people, we have to look at ourselves first. Meaning, when I'm looking at somebody, am I even capable of understanding what problematic patterns are or what good, healthy patterns are? So, what are my values, and are my values healthy for me? Do I have triggers that may make me feel that trauma again? And is that going to cloud my judgment at all? And then what are my long-term goals? So, to give an example, if I don't really have any ambitious or long-term goals and I don't have standards for friends, then anybody who basically walks into my life, if I think that they're not that problematic of a person, yeah, why not? They're my friend. I don't have standards. But if I have long-term goals, like, hey, I'm married, I'm having children, I want friends who are married, who are stable, and want to raise their kids the same way, then all of a sudden those goals change how I'm going to profile people. The next part is having non-negotiables and making sure you're extremely clear with yourself on what they mean. And what are those non-negotiables based off of? A lot of people choose someone's character, their faith, and their family vision. And we have those as non-negotiables, then we have preferences. So I prefer if my wife has the same hobbies as myself, because that means I get to enjoy something with her, even be competitive. But at the end of the day, having the same hobby may be a flexible preference and not a non-negotiable where my wife has to do horseback riding or archery or race cars, the exact same thing, because that may not be, and most time isn't necessarily an indicator of relationship stability. If we do not have non-negotiables based on character, then we are missing a key aspect to relationships, which is character is what builds and maintains a relationship. Whatever reason you can come up with for wanting to commit to somebody or let them enter your life, if we overlook how character plays a role, then we are overlooking the foundations of what it means of how they're going to treat us, what their personal ethics are, and what they're going to step over, walk over, what rules they're willing to break. And this is really important because the foundation of a relationship is character. I don't think any of us would call somebody or like to call somebody a friend who disrespects us, walks over our personal boundaries, insults us behind our back, and many, many other things. So there are certain boundaries we need to be very clear about when it comes to character. Now is vetting. When we are trying to vet somebody, we can listen to their words all we want. Their words only give us an indication of what we might want to look further into, but we don't necessarily want to take their words as absolute truth. So in order to vet them, we have to observe them. So like an investigator or a profiler like Terrance, for instance, gathers information about somebody before they go and approach them, we should gather information about somebody to make an informed decision before we let ourselves get emotionally attached or even attached because of our decision making. And we want to focus on risk indicators. A good, healthy relationship is somebody who is secure in themselves and stable. It also means they don't rush to make decisions, that they think about them through. So somebody who is a lot of personal insecurities, who is impulsive, that seems to be making choices on a whim based on their desires alone and not a long thought out plan means our relationship to them is not something of a priority where they need to think about it and plan it, which means we're really talking about impulsive people as unpredictable. And if somebody's unpredictable, they're not safe for us because we don't know who they are or what they're going to do or even why. But more importantly than any of that, Terrance and I are talking about, especially when we're talking about the workshop later and about sociopaths, somebody who does not care how they affect other people, who has a lack of empathy, leads to manipulation tactics, and it's very dangerous for us. So we need to focus on how they feel about how they affect other people. Now, just because we feel like we've done a little bit of vetting doesn't mean that we can jump in. We need gradual engagement and we need to test boundaries. We need to provide somebody a boundary and see whether they intentionally cross it or they try and test to see whether you're going to stand up for yourself or not. So we don't jump in head first and give them all the information about our life and tell them where we live and tell them where we work and tell them what we're vulnerable about. It needs to be a natural progression forward where we're reciprocating. So we need to give them some information. We expect them to give us some information, and we want to test and see what they do with it. So, how do they react to the boundaries that we set? But also, how do they involve their family and friends in this process? And how do they deal with life pressures? Do they lose their cool? Do they turn to things that will not help them? Do they go to people who are not good for them to get information that they can't tell is helpful and then expect that to work out? Because if they're talking to other people, you best bet that when you think things are private, they're also talking to other people. A huge principle of profiling is that stress reveals character. That you are the essence of who you are when you are beaten down and under scrutiny. So, do they default to respect or control? A big key indicator of somebody who is insecure and does not know what to do when they're under pressure is they result to absolute control rather than respecting that they may not have control and trying to figure out a solution rather than brute force. And that is a huge indicator on what's going to happen in the future when you have a disagreement. A misunderstanding or disagreement, if somebody under pressure results to control rather than respect, forget your boundaries and forget a positive or helpful or beneficial event moving forward because instead they're going to try to control you and walk over you. And at that point, you're talking to a child, you're not talking to an adult. So at that point, it's really difficult to move forward in a relationship. And physical intimacy brings a lot of emotion into the picture. So we need to be very careful not to cloud our own judgments. And just like we talked about before about the reticular activating system and the hippocampus, we need to give ourselves our own best chance at trying to see clearly and identify problems or provide evidence that somebody is safe for us. And by getting physically involved too early or rushing that intimacy, it clouds our judgment because we end up focusing on how they make us feel, not their character or who they should be for us, and whether they fit that healthy persona that we need and are looking for. If we let ourselves get too emotionally involved, head over heels, infatuated, that's what we're going to focus on. And that's where we start missing obvious red flags. But one of the things that Terrance and I talk about quite a lot that can help with that is none of us are perfect. Sometimes we're just going to miss stuff, even if we're not so emotionally involved. And that's why we need trusted, proven people with experience that can help vet people with us so that when we miss something, they can bring it to our attention. And if we minimize the amount of emotional commitment to somebody early on, having that person tell us, hey, you didn't notice this, but they treat anybody that is serving them like they're a slave. So maybe you might want to look out for that. We can go, oh, okay, I didn't notice it, thank you, and move on rather than seeing everything through rose-colored glasses. Because we talked about this last time. If you're wearing rose-colored glasses, all flags look red. Red just look like normal flags. Can't tell the difference, so we need to be careful. When it comes to commitment and integration, it needs to be based on character, not chemistry. And I would like to define what I mean by chemistry. Chemistry is how well we work together or how easy it is to get along with somebody. And absolutely, we want chemistry in our relationships. But chemistry is not the starting point. Chemistry is something that can be built or gained or worked on. But it's a lot different to try and convince somebody that because you have two different goals or two different types of character that don't mesh, that this is still a good idea to get involved. It's not a good idea. So we need to focus on character and we can look at chemistry as an addition to that. But we need to use the LRF evaluation of is it logical, reasonable, and firm? Are they safe? Are they secure in themselves? Do they make rash decisions? Are they consistent? Meaning, whatever logic by which they make decisions and the pattern of decisions they've made in their life, are they consistent? And more importantly than that, do their decisions build them up and build their life up in quality and build up the people who are closest to them and around them? Or do they drain the people around them of resources? Because somebody who's a multiplier, who's going to build other people up, they're not going to just build you up. They're going to build the relationship up. And they're going to build up the relationship with the people around you that you rely on. But if they're a drain, we don't want somebody who's a drain on our financial resources, our emotional resources, our health. When we're thinking about a relationship, this is something that grows over time. So somebody who drains it is not going to help us. And last but not least, one of the things we wanted to touch on is integration. We're all unique. And that brings a beautiful thing to relationships where we can explore the things we did not know about somebody else and how they're different from everyone else, and we can appreciate that. But those differences may cause understandings or there might be a little bit of discomfort. So, do we intentionally try and integrate into each other's community and come from a place of understanding, including their family and life plans? However, when we involve somebody with our family and our future life plans, we only involve them when we've determined that we want them there and that they should be there. So we should not plan the future of our life with somebody until their patterns prove stable and we've determined that we're on the same path, purpose, goals, and we intend to do them with the similar amount of character and ethics.
Absolutely. So now we're gonna, right before we get to the workshop, we're just gonna get some basic understanding of what is a sociopath, because there's a lot of different definitions. There's some working definitions. So this is what we're gonna go with for right now. So sociopaths effectively mimic genuine emotions, helping them blend into various social environments and situations. So you're looking at somebody that's basically putting on a mask. They're pretending to be like a regular person. They're pretending to care about other individuals. But behind that mask is their own intentions. The perfect example is when we go and maybe we go buy a car or we're going to go buy some furniture. When we're dealing with the salesperson, most salespeople have an agenda, and that agenda is very different from ourselves. They want to sell a product. And even if the product isn't necessarily what you want or what you may need, they have their own criteria and their own basis. And because of that, what our well-being might be it could be diametrically opposed from that other individual. And that's why it's so important to, when we're entering into relationships or situations with other people, we need to be clear of what they want from us. And is this what they want from us, what we want from that same situations? Next part is observation replication. They closely observe others to replicate behaviors and emotional responses, enhancing their ability to appear authentic. So a lot of the sociopaths I studied, they actually spent a lot of time in the mirror imitating other people, imitating what they thought happiness looked like, imitating what they thought a person should behave like in different situations. But it's all pretend. They don't really know how to do it because you're dealing with something that's very close, more like an arachnid or an insect than an actual flesh and blood person. But one of the tall tale signs is the lack of emotional depth when you deal with this individual. So their expressions and actions often lack emotional depth, acting as tools for manipulation or deception. So say you're having something that has happened to you. Maybe you lost your job, or something has happened that rocked the foundation of your life, and you're explaining this to that other person. Will they walk into that world with you and actually empathize with you? Or is this somebody that just gives you that little pat on the back, yeah, 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 and then they get back to talking about themselves? And one of the things we're going to talk about is this is on a scale. There are some people that have small amounts of sociopathic behavior. You got other people that are truly a danger to everyone around them. And this is where we're going to start. And the example we're going to give is from the movie Weapons that just came out. Go ahead, Ryan. So this is a workshop that's set up to notice problematic people. And I'm not saying the movie Weapons is a good movie because there was a lot of plot holes in it, but it gave so many different examples of sociopathic and problematic people in ways to spot them really early on in the relationship. Go ahead.
I actually saw this yesterday. It's very fresh in my mind, but one of the things that we're going to be going through here is the fact that I actually couldn't think of a stable relationship in the movie, Terrance.
Because there was none.
And we're going to go through some of this in the workshop. There's a lot more that we're end up going to put longer form content on Patreon. But the first thing that we can start of is kind of having a compass, right? A compass, a map, a grid, some place where we can start understanding how much of a danger is somebody to me really. And this isn't a, fast and go rule. So we broke it up and it's more of a continuum, a spectrum, but we can start with five basic levels. And that is mild self-preservation, that we as humans, we tend to want to make excuses for ourselves, but not anybody else. And so when we're put into a very difficult situation, uh, people will sometimes, through mild self-preservation, mostly because of their emotions, not anything that extreme, will resort to small amounts of manipulation. This includes white lies or the omission of truth when speaking to somebody, or the omission of detail, just to make sure that the reputation isn't broken or they're not put in a difficult situation. And this is often because they know how the person's going to react. So it's not that big of a deal, but it is something to look out for. The next part is defensive manipulation. This one is a little bit more severe, where they intentionally misdirect or withhold info, but they're still mostly reactive to what's happening. It's not that they go out through their daily life planning, how can I get things out of people? How can I manipulate them? And how am I going to come up with this long-term plan to do so? It's more so, hey, something is more of a threat to me, and now I'm getting on the defensive. So, what is the quickest way I can get out of it? And then they resort to manipulation and deception.
I would say think of like a coworker where somebody's going to get in trouble for missing a deadline or something happened. And instead of that person taking accountability for the situation, they try their best to blame other individuals.
Yep, it looks like throwing people under the bus or getting rid of evidence, deleting emails, deleting proof that it was them, whatever that may be. The third part is opportunistic. So we're now switching from somebody who's more reactive under stress to somebody who's intentionally this way, especially when they see something they can get. So they use people or events to their own personal advantage, but especially with little regard for how they affect other people. Now, I'm not talking about, right, when we're at work and we have a good relationship with somebody, that we ask them for a favor or we tell somebody, hey, I know a guy, this will help us out a lot. We're not talking about that. What we're really talking about is somebody who sees those types of opportunities and does not care how it hurts other people, that it could wreck other people. They might look at an opportunity of, I have a really good relationship with the boss, so I can lie that it was my coworker's fault, and I know they're not going to check me on it, and they're going to believe me, and I'm going to get that promotion.
Mhm.
That's what it looks like. And this could be reactive, but more often than not, these people are constantly thinking about what can I get out of this situation and how can I come up on top. And again, and I don't care what it does to other people as long as I achieve my goal. The next one is exploitative. So now we're not just caring that somebody else gets hurt, we're intentionally hurting other people for gain and with very little remorse. So we're going far beyond, I just want me to pull out ahead and I don't care what happens to other people. Now it's going, I need to pull out ahead. And now I'm going to start planning how to emotionally manipulate the people around me and hurt them or harm them to get what I want. But they're still focused on potentially just one goal. And they are very dangerous. We're now getting into extreme predator territory, which I would love for you to add on things that I might have missed, Terrance, as soon as I'm done with this. But
Mhm.
predatory sociopathy is cold and calculated harm with no empathy. And they do not look at other people as human. They do not consider them as someone worth feeling sorry for or worth considering in their actions. They're seen completely as resources and tools, soulless, in order to advance themselves forward. So we're going from opportunistic to the predatory stage in increasing levels of harm to the people around them, calculating long-term goals and plans of manipulation to make sure they get what they want, and the amount of harm to people significantly increases. But we'll talk about it through the workshop. There are many mistakes and red flags that most people will miss because they're unaware. But if we just look at a few key characteristics, we can see them coming a mile away.
Absolutely. One of the things I wanted to add is when you're looking at low levels psychopathy, this is defensive, meaning that they're not creating the situation. They're just trying to get out of the situation. So they're not actively hunting other people. Other way I look at it is like pigs. Pigs are not usually domesticated pigs are not usually a dangerous animal. But if there are cases where if you fall into a pig pen and you're knocked unconscious, pigs will consume humans because they're garbage disposals. But that's a completely different type of danger than walking around in India and a tiger attacks you. So this is the difference between like an opportunistic person where if depending on the situation, they will lie, they will cheat, they will try to maximize versus something that's like an active predator that its main purpose is the hunt. And that's a quick way to understand it. All right, next. So we're going to give a breakdown of three characters from the movie Weapons. And we're going to talk about it on from quote unquote some of the least harmless to the most harmless. But just in the interest of time, we're just going to go through three characters. But the larger video me and Ryan are going to make is probably going to be around 30 minutes, and we're going to go through 7 to 8 characters. Because again, the movie is a great example of the problematic people out there. So the first one is Justine. I would give her level 1 to 2 moderate manipulation. Um, she's extremely afraid of being vulnerable, and because of that, she has personal struggles that gets in the way of emotional exposure and protecting oneself from judgment. So, Ryan, when you saw the movie, what did you notice about that?
She's a child. She is focused on what will make her feel better rather than having the self-awareness to understand that she's not helping the situation and nothing is getting better.
Correct. And there's a failure of her to understand how, in the movie, if you don't know the basic plot, you
Mhm.
have 17 kids from her classroom essentially go missing by voluntary means. They open up the door and they run out, and nobody can find them. So literally months later, they still haven't found the children, and she's trying to get her job back. And just common sense. First of all, if my kid went missing, I wouldn't be sending my other kids to school. The school would probably be shut down. But she is more concerned with getting normalcy back to her life,
Mhm.
not about the fact that this is taking place and people still haven't cleared her from wrongdoing. In her mind, she knows she's innocent, and that's what matters. But it's hard for her to actually connect with other people. The reason that somebody like this is potentially dangerous is they're very hard once they get their mind set. It's very hard for them to look at other people's perspectives. So this might be somebody that you would call stubborn, and somebody might say, "Hey, I'm gonna get in a relationship with this person," and they'll change their mind one day. But
Mhm.
often they don't. The same problems they had when they were 22 are the same problems they might have with other people when they're 62. Because, like Ryan said, they're like a 7-year old in a 37 or 47-year old's body. They got taller, but they didn't get smarter. All right, next slide.
The next one we're going to talk about is the policeman or her ex-boyfriend, basically.
Hmm.
And one of the reasons why he's so dangerous, and we're putting it more of an opportunistic level, level three, is specifically because he uses his authority as a officer to shape the events around him, as well as his perception and protect his reputation. But he's willing to go forward with intentional violence to protect his reputation. And by the way, in the movie, his reputation is threatened because of his own mistakes. So he's using the violence to cover up his own mistakes. And every time he does, the consequences get worse and worse. So he uses that threat of violence to manipulate the people around him. To give it a good example from the movie, we'll talk a little bit more about the other characters, but there's a character that lies to him when he's doing a search and he ends up getting really hurt. He gets stuck with a needle. And, who knows? He might not have AIDS now. The guy might have HIV and he's going to contract AIDS later on. He has no idea. He's so angry, he punches the guy on camera. Now he goes through this whole thing of trying to get the kid to admit or to promise that he's not going to tell on him, and he shuts off the camera. And at first, he's sad about what happens, and he goes and talks to the police chief to figure out what they can do. But he warns the kid, don't, if I ever see you again, we're gonna have a problem. Now he's threatening. And later on, when he sees the kid, when the kid was, we'll talk about whether the kid was trying to do something good or not. But at the time, we have no idea why the kid is coming back to the police station. He immediately jumps to conclusions. This kid is going to tell, he's going to ruin my reputation. And the first thing he does is chase him down so he can beat the crap out of him. And it does not work well for him. So any threat to his reputation is met with violence immediately. But not only that, he has many chances to walk away from problematic situations and instead lies about his relationship status or other things to make sure he can get what he wants. So he never should have showed up to the bar alone to see one of our problematic main characters, but he chooses to anyway, despite being in a committed relationship with the daughter of his boss, by the way. And when she tries to seduce him, he decides to lie and say, well, we're on a break anyway. It doesn't matter. So he's messing with people's lives and messing with the commitments he's made and is trying to fix things through further lies or threatening people to make sure that he comes out on top. So
Absolutely.
all of these are self-serving motives and are a calculated use of his authority.
Yes. Next.
Is there anything you wanted to add, Terrence?
No, in the interest of time, we can just keep it moving. So the real predator in the movie is Gladys the Witch. So again, if I'm spoiling it, I'm sorry, but the movie's been out for a little while. But this is the real killer. This is the real sociopath. You don't usually come across sociopaths like this every day. I've come across them a lot when I did like human trafficking cases because in order to sell people into slavery, you have to be like you have to completely break the boundaries of empathy. But that's the kind of creature that Gladys is. So this person uses manipulation, exploits others, subjects them to harm, men, women, and children alike. And what's clear about these types of people is like the striking absence of empathy and disregard for moral boundaries. So when I've talked to individuals like this before, they they could be eating Wendy's while describing the last like 5 or 6 people they killed. It's a complete, it's almost like again like you're talking to an insect. It's not like you're talking to a person. Their deceitful and aggressive actions are widespread. So they're like a locust. Everywhere they go, they destroy the greenery around them. These are individuals that really have no place in regular society. They don't know how to be human. They don't know how to care. So a lot of times somebody will say, "Hey, I was with a narcissist, a real narcissist, and I'm just trying to get closure." It's like you're never going to get closure. That person is never going to admit that they did anything wrong because they will never look at themselves as a bad person. If you watch some of the interviews from like serial killers like Ted Bundy, even on his dying breath, he was still basically blaming alcohol in his background for the person he was. There was very little, if any, empathy for all the crimes he committed because they don't look at themselves as evil. Another example of this is if you ever saw the movie Inglorious Bastards, that the main villain in that movie, the reason he's so dangerous, he doesn't look at himself as evil. He just looks at himself as a product of the world around them. Now, it's not all bad as far as dealing with these individuals, because one of the tall tale ways that they end up in your life is they play on people's ability and desire not to be rude. So many of these individuals, their kryptonite is a direct person that calls them out and says, "Hey, I don't think you're okay. Hey, I'm not going to let you in my life. I don't know what you're about. I don't know who you are." Because people that end up mostly as victims, they often don't call people out until they're too far into the relationship. But if we have that skill set where we're very cautious about moving someone into our life, then they often tell on themselves because they're impulsive. It's extremely hard for them to control themselves once their victim is in front of them. It's harder and harder. And if you put up boundaries, then they're likely going to select another target. The sad thing about the movie Weapons is the smartest character in the movie was only in it for like a minute or two. And that was a very specific character that did not fall for the witch's spell. Off the bat, this character could tell that there was something wrong and actually warned other individuals about this person. But again, people didn't listen. So All right, Ryan.
I saw a comment that I wanted to address real quick. So earlier, when we talked about the things that we focus on and that we pay attention to, we notice them more and more and more. We got to be really careful because Terrance and I are talking about signs of
Suspect.
sociopaths and potentially ways of building healthier relationships. And there's an inclination for self-preservation. Obviously, we want to feel safe, we want to feel secure. But if we look at everyone as psychopaths, then we are going to start treating everyone like that. And we won't realize that's what we're doing, and we start building habits that actually drive people away. So instead, what we can do is say, I don't know who this person is, and I have no reason to believe they're safe for me. So let me find evidence of whether this person is safe for me or not and move from there. And at the end of the day, we might use labels like narcissist, like sociopath, or psychopathy. But at the end of the day, it's not about the label. It's not about needing to understand whether this person is a narcissist and find the correct label. It's about if I see problematic behavior that is not good for me, I do not care why this person is acting this way. I'm going to walk away. And that type of decision making is one of the things that can help us achieve 80% better results in a very short amount of time. Let's just not entertain the problems when they come up. But looking at everyone as evil or opportunistic or as a narcissist or psychopath or whatever label you want to give it, before we've even gotten to understand them, will actually harm how we see the world. And it has ripple effects later on. So let's just start with what is my evidence that this person's actually good for me?
Absolutely. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a PDF out here. This is what I use to, well, what I've used on thousands of cases on how you call out a liar without saying anything. So I'm going to put that in the chat right now.
Mhm.
A lot of people don't realize one of the best ways to call out a liar has nothing to do with your saying anything. It's silence. So if somebody's lying, they're constantly in front of you looking for the tell that you buy into their story. So when I was doing investigations and somebody was trying to craft a narrative to me and they said, "Okay, I was across the street at 7 p.m. I didn't see anything." If they know it's a lie and I'm not responding to them, I'm just watching them and writing things down. Now the lie is in their head over and over again. And what would usually happen is if it was a lie, they start getting nervous. They're moving around. They're rubbing their head because now it's like, why does this person not believe me? What evidence does he have? What's going on? So silence is one of the best ways to stop a lot of this stuff. So like when I'm dealing with a salesperson, I don't give them a lot of information because I'm not there to give them information. I'm there to do what I want and to buy what I want. So the least amount of information that I give them, it makes it harder for them to blindly get me into the direction they want. The other thing I want to bring up is there is power in movement. So when you're in a tense situation with someone, or there's somebody that gives you bad feelings, think about being in a swimming pool. That the harder you go against the water, the more you tire yourself out. If you slow down your movements, slow down your cadence, you're the one that becomes the powerful person in the room. One of the things that manipulators and sociopaths try to do is they try to bring you to their speed. And their speed is often quick because they want you to think quick. They want you to do this quick. They're going to love bomb you. They're going to do all these things because they're going to try to get you on their pathway. But the slowing of it down says, I am not going to be moved. I am going to communicate in this way so I can properly analyze what's going on. And in the movie Weapons, one of the things that the manipulative person did it throughout the movie was she moved very rapidly. She consistently broke through people's boundaries because she didn't ask for permission. And then
Hmm.
the individuals were the ones tasked with trying to slow her down, but nobody directly slowed her down. So she just went from boundary to boundary to boundary. And what you'll notice is this is what problematic people do. They don't ask for permission, they kick open doors. And then they wait for you to shut the door if you ever do shut the door. But we'll talk more about that on the Patreon. Ryan, you can go ahead and break down the scale for us.
This scale is a little bit deceptive. Let me explain. We do not have an even distribution of people that exist through all five stages. Past three, especially four, closer to five, we're talking about such a small minority of people. But in laying it out this way, it gives us an easy way to chart out how somebody makes us feel, why they make us feel that way, but more importantly, what is the pattern of their actions? What boundaries do they break? And how do they break them? And how do they hurt other people to get what they want? And if we keep answering these questions with and having problematic answers, they move further and further and further to the right. So an example that we gave that has a few of the characters, but not all, is walking us through kind of this spectrum of the problematic people in their relationships. So on the left, to more defensive is Justine and James. They are lying or emotionally manipulating people as a defensive tactic to get themselves out of a sticky situation, focusing on their emotions and their reputation. But Paul and Archer are doing more of opportunistic stuff. So there's even a guy who, just like a kid, who goes to mom and asks for something, and mom says no, so they go to dad. This guy does the same thing to get the information and overstep a very personal boundary because he just wants to get what he wants. Then we have Gladys all the way on the right, and we have an unlabeled X because between three and four, because we're going to talk about that on our long form content. But also, this is a spectrum. Somebody might not be on a specific line or an interval of two, three, or four. It might be somewhere in between. But one of the things that Terrance and I have hit home quite a lot, whether it's dealing with sociopaths or understanding if the person is simply problematic to you, or finding whether the person in front of you matches your long-term goals and is good for you, or coming up with your own long-term life and family goals. We have to be able to write it down and it has to make sense to us. So taking a quick inventory about the relationships we have at work, our extracurriculars, or even with our family and our friends can give us a much better picture about, hey, things don't feel right, but I don't know where they're coming from. Good. Let's put it on paper. Let's write it down. Let's put some evidence. And now we can see it clearly. And now that we've laid out something logical, reasonable, and factual, the LRF method we talked about before, now we make a decision on it. And that way, our decisions help move us forward rather than being tied to our emotions, which can be flaky and manipulated quite easily rather than based on facts.
Absolutely. All right.
I'm going to go through this a little quickly. Some starting questions. If we are considering entering a committed relationship with somebody before we commit to them, some of the ways we want to determine if they're safe for us and if we're aligned are asking these 7 questions or so. Is this person a role model of who I would like to be? Do I look up to the way that they treat others and even the way that they view the world and the decisions they make? Does this person's actions and their words line up? Meaning, do they have integrity? Are they consistent? And are they predictable? If they're not, we're going to have a problem. Do they lead me with emotion or with sense and logic? If somebody is leading the relationship with emotion, that emotion doesn't have substance. If we're feeling attached to somebody or like we really like them and want to move forward, that emotion should come from sense and logic and evidence, such as I am admiring this person because of their amazing character to go out of their way to help somebody, even though it means the rest of their plans are messed up and ruined. If I start admiring somebody and I feel that emotion, it's not about their leading me with emotion. I'm feeling that emotion from a place that makes sense towards my non-negotiables of character. But if they are trying to convince me that we'd be good together because of how much fun we have, and every conversation is jokes and laughing, and it lacks substance, they're leading with this emotion. We need to be careful. That person may not be a bad person, but that doesn't mean that they're good for us and good for our sense of what we want a relationship to be. Do they run away from their problems or towards them? If somebody runs away from their problems, it means they don't fix problems. They cause problems and then they leave everyone else to deal with it while they go somewhere else. And we don't want a partner who does that with us. And what I mean by running towards their problems, it means faces them head on with courage, with bravery, but with accountability, going, I need to do something about this, and it's my job to fix it. If we don't have somebody who has a invested interest to fix problems, especially when they're caused by themselves, then we don't have a good foundation of a relationship with somebody else. Do they sincerely care about how they affect other people? We want somebody who's empathetic. They can understand when we make mistakes and not just run over people for the sake of their own gain. What is their purpose in life? But also without me. If I was never in the picture, what was their long-term goals? That's what we need to find out because we haven't even determined whether we should be in each other's lives to meet those long-term goals. So I want to know what they're telling me about themselves, not just their emotions about trying to get me attached to them and say, but we would have such a nice family together and I can take you on this many vacations and we're going to have this amount of fun and I'm going to give you this amount of money. Well, what were your life goals without me? Stop putting my name. Stop trying to make me feel good about it. Just tell me what your goals are because if I'm not right for you, I want to know, if it was somebody else that came along, how are you treating them? Because that's how you're going to treat everybody else. But we need to answer this question for ourselves. And likewise, the next one, what is their purpose in specifically pursuing me? Somebody who's manipulative does not want facts to be laid out on the table. Just like Terrance said, they're assuming and going off of the power that people are not going to question them. They're not going to bring facts and they're not going to be perceived as rude. Like the hesitation of standing up for ourselves because we might be perceived as rude is one of the things that they prey on. So we need to make it very clear. Why are you interested in me specifically? If they can't lay it out, there's a problem. And but likewise, we through all of these questions, we need to be asking ourselves, well, why am I pursuing them? These are 7 quick questions that can help us set us straight very early on in the process, and we need to write them down and we need to check them often because it helps keep us accountable even when we don't have somebody else to help us vet people. But Terrance and I always suggest having somebody in your life that is proven time and time again that you can rely on, that has good head on their shoulders and proven experience to help you vet the people around you.
Absolutely. Yep. So that's the end of the basic presentation. We appreciate everybody for watching and the comments. There was tons of comments. Go ahead, Ryan. We can go to the news right quick. So our relationship improvement book is still scheduled to be coming out next month. We're not going to have a bunch of presentations until then. I think we have like 2 or 3 scheduled because we really got to focus on getting the book out. We're going to have part 5 to smart dating in the end of September. We're going to be going even further. So again, we always try to break down a book or a movie. So part 5, it's going to be an even more intensive workshop. Um, first part is going to be again on this. The second part is going to be an actual workshop that we can talk through. People, we can talk through stuff. We're going to watch some footage together and basically turn everybody into their own version of a criminal profiler. So that's going to be fun. We have the Smart Love After Heartbreak, How to Heal Without Getting Hardened. We have that scheduled for next month because, a lot of us have been through things. Some of the times the manipulators and problematic people might be your own parents, your sister, your brother, family members, cousins, bosses, all types of things. And the hard part is going forward with that understanding that sometimes the problematic people could be the people that are closest to you. But how do we walk forward with that understanding while still being joyful and happy with the world? So we're going to talk about strategies for that. And in closing, Patreon's at 350 members. YouTube is over 500. We already have over 30 topics on the Patreon. So if you haven't already joined, go ahead and tap into that. And then me and Brian are going to be available for probably around 45 minutes to an hour for questions. And I'm going to go ahead and end the recording.